So I was going to surprise you with the Rickroll, but unfortunately it's been ruined. But that's okay, not a problem. We'll move on to the actual introduction video. So that's, I think, a good introduction to what my project is. It's called Aston. It's a submission to the 2009 NASA Space Element Design Competition. What that pretty much means is, I'll show you the contest guidelines, but it pretty much tasks high school students with designing all aspects of a space settlement for inhabitation within the next 50 or so years. So I guess I'm going to go on to exactly what my presentation will consist of. So I'll start off with talking pretty much what the contest requires you to do, what the guidelines are. Then into the design philosophy, so what I really took into account. The structural design, construction process, the life support systems, social structure, acknowledgements, and closing remarks. And any avid gamers out there would realize that the song that I played during the introduction video was actually Halo. But anyway, so on to the contest guidelines. So I'm sure you guys are not really sure what the actual contest is. But like I said, it's designing all aspects of a space settlement to be orbiting the Earth orbit anywhere. And it's required for a minimum of 10,000 residents and supporting a transition population of over 300 people. It must be feasibly constructed within 50 years using reasonable extrapolations of existing technology. So nothing like fancy like phasers or little spaceships or anti-gravity devices or anything like that. So it has to be something that you can really build with existing technology. So that's something I really took into account, and I should really try to focus on that one. But and if you guys have any questions, feel free to just yell them out or just raise your hand. I'm happy to answer it. So the design philosophy. So what I really tried to take into account when I was looking at this contest, there were really four important guiding principles. Most of you guys are engineers, so I'm sure you might have seen this in your courses in university or high school, whatever. The ideal of modularity, so parts that you can interchange with one another, replace them with something else, or modify them, expand them, etc. The ideal of mass reduction, efficiency, cost reduction, etc. The use of existing technology, like I said, no replicators, no phasers, no transporters, antimatter, that doesn't exist. Of course, an emphasis on social systems. What I'm just pretty much trying to say is make sure that it's livable for people and not for robots. So any one of you Googlers out there should be able to live comfortably on the station and not have to come back to Earth. So basically, I'm just going to go into overall layout of what the whole station really looks like. So you see there's an overall shot of the station. They can be divided into three main areas. The habitation region, as you can see there, the central industry hub, and the interspatial structure. In terms of the size, it varies from the total height from 1.7 kilometers high to 1 kilometer in diameter, and can support a maximum population of 22,400 people. So the habitation region itself consists mainly of a series of pods. That's actually the basis of the entire station. And these pods are actually developed from something that NASA developed in 1994 called the Trans-Hab module. Now what the Trans-Hab module is essentially a giant balloon. You send it into space, you inflate it, and you can live in it. So on the left, you can see there with the black background, that's the Trans-Hab concept. So you can see the people living there. I just pretty much took the exact same and added solar panels to the outside of it, and that's the same thing on the right. Now inside, it's pretty much like a condominium. And you guys live in a house or condominium, I'm sure you guys would have seen this. You have your own bedroom, you've got like a living room out there, open concept kitchen, a bathroom. The only thing that this doesn't provide you is natural gas because it's explosive. So, So each of these pods is around 11,200 of these pods. And these pods are connected to what we call ring segments. Now these ring segments are nothing more than giant hallways, like the office hallways you see out in your outside the Google offices. So they pretty much link all of these pods together. And the special thing about these is, like the Habitation modules, they're all mass producible. They're composed of tiny little segments called ring segments themselves, and these are pretty much joined together like blocks of Lego. And you simply weld them together, and you got your whole ring hallway right there. You've also got attached to these pods something called support structures. Because gravity is exerted on the station, you don't want the balloon sort of sagging downwards. You want to keep it at a stiff position. So we have steel poles with hydraulic clamps on them that would secure these habitat modules in place. So these ring segments are actually, the structure of them is also, you can see there's a picture there of the Habitation module with the actual ring segments connected together. But the structure of the ring segments is based upon what the aerospace industry uses in their jetliners, which is a semi-monocoque shell. So what that consists of is a stressed metal skin over a series of struts. And those struts, in this case, are composed of titanium and carbon fiber. So it's meant to provide a really, really strong structure at the same time with a low weight. So these ring segments are connected to what we call vestibules. If you saw in the picture before, they're just giant boxes. These giant boxes contain everything that's required for life support. So oxygen production, recreation, like foosball tables and rock band. Well, pretty much everything. You can see there's a bit of a park there too. Yeah, so they connect to these vestibules. And so you can imagine them if you're like a condominium building, like George Stroumboulopoulos said on The Hour. Your little pods are like your little separate apartments, and this would be like the swimming pool they're building or something like that. So you can see on the inside it composed of 4 levels, levels 1 to 4. Level 2 is the one with the actual gravity level. I'll tell you how gravity is made. But there's different varying levels of gravity, and then the upper levels would have lower gravity, the lower levels would have higher gravity, and then you can use them for separate things. In fact, there's a whole separation. You can see that level 1 is mainly meant for agricultural purposes, so meat growing, I'll talk about more of that later on, hydroponic planting. Level 2 consists of all the parts that you would normally see, your pool tables, your gyms, your pools, your parks, etc. Level 3 consists of water filtration and storage, so how we recycle the water, how everything is kept alive. And the bottom part is secondary energy storage, so electricity, so what makes the lights run. So the structure of the vestibules themselves, how they maintain their shape, is actually based upon space frames. You might have seen them with Buckminster Fullerene's geodesic domes, or with the biosphere too. But this is the exact same thing. It uses steel tubes arranged in triangular structures to provide a very strong and lightweight support system. So they all come together, and this is what they pretty much look like up close. You can see that the pods, these multiple habitat pods, they connect to, you see the ring hallways, and these ring hallways connect to the giant box or the vestibule. And the vestibule, you see something coming out of it. I'll talk more about that later on. So that's what the habitation region looks like itself. So if you move on to the next part of the station called the central industry hub, you see it's a giant white cylinder in the center. That's pretty much where all of the zero-gravity manufacturing and research takes place on board the station. It's separated into a bunch of different segments. There's a docking network at the top, but it's mainly meant for manufacturing purposes, research, maybe a Google office somewhere, and as well as primary energy storage, as well as zero-gravity space hotel. So on there, it's actually isolated from the rotation of the entire space station, which is how we generate gravity. But it's isolated from it using magnetic bearings, which has been developed by NASA and is currently under perfection. So pretty much the entire station spins, but like an axle in a ball bearing. Everything would spin, but the central industry itself would not move at all and would stay motionless, thus having zero gravity. So if you, let's say, to fly up to my space station, Aston, you would fly up in, let's say, a space plane, and you would dock through here, which would be a docking network. Consists of a series of each of these tubes that would jut out from the central corridor. So if you pretty much dock here, you'd float out of your space shuttle into your central corridor, and you can pass by, and the first thing you might pass by is the space hotel. Now this is meant for where we support, your family members, let's say your mother-in-law or something like that, people you don't want to see in your house. You just stick them into your hotel where they can live for up to 3 weeks, in a zero gravity, and they have an observation, so they can stare at the stars or in the pitch black deepness of space. Or if your mother-in-law, you can just stick her in the hotel room and let her watch TV. So now, so after you pass the hotel, you can see the central quarters in the center. But after you pass the hotel, you pass the satellite manufacturing, which is where the bulk of money comes into the station. So there's actually, the satellite manufacturing is divided into subcompartments themselves and can actually open into the space and release, spacecraft, satellites, whatever. So there's different segments. You've got the offices, which are gray. You've got the parts manufacturing, which is red. And then you've got the storage, which I think is green. And then you've got the blue section, which is final assembly and then release. So that's pretty much all of the central industry hub. And then we move on to the final section of the structural design, which is the interspatial structure. So if you were to imagine the entire space station as a giant bicycle wheel, these would be the spokes of the bicycle wheel. So in fact, the bicycle wheel spokes, or the interspatial structure, not all of them actually connect the central industry hub. You have some parts which are actually floating just around it. They were not necessarily connected. You can sort of see them with what they call transport channels, and those are the elevators you saw with the magnetic bearings on them. But then you have what they call adjustable gravity labs. Now these adjustable gravity labs, in order to minimize the amount of bearings found on the station, these pretty much sort of float on the surface of the central industry hub and don't exactly come in contact with it. So what these transport channels are, they're nothing more than giant elevators. The only difference with these elevators is that they have cables on the top and below. For those of you who understand physics, I'm sure you guys have taken it in high school, gravity levels vary from the central industry hub to the habitation region, so it's necessary to have complete tension at all times with the elevator car. It's a double-decker elevator just so you can have high volumes of cargo and high volumes of people. Now the adjustable gravity labs, these labs there's 2 of them in each of the channels, and I think there's 5 times 3, 15 channels in total, so 30 labs. Each of these labs can move up and down the entire channel and can provide varying gravity levels. So let's say you want to test something, how it would work in Moon or how it would work on Mars. You simply stick it into the adjustable gravity lab and move it up and down. So that's pretty much the general outline of the design on what the overall space station looks like. But now it goes into the finite details of how you can actually construct it. So I'm sure you guys have seen this in university Gantt charts. Everyone loves them. So this much is a timeline of construction. I estimated, barring any sort of political problems, money problems, financial, that always screws things over. But it should take roughly 30 years. Preparation phase is 15, construction phase is 12, and the habitation phase is 3. I'll be focusing more on the construction phase. Preparation phase and habitation phase, I'll answer questions about that later. But the construction begins really in lunar orbit. We have a mining facility, or we hope to have a mining facility on the Moon to get raw materials like titanium, iron, etc. And from that point, we build the central industry hub. Oh, sorry, placement first, my bad. So the most important thing is to realize where would this space station be placed. There's a whole bunch of places. You can stick it around Jupiter, you can stick it around the Sun, you can stick it, anywhere really. But for me, most space stations have 3 possibilities. There's what they call Lagrange points, low Earth orbit, which is where the ISS is, and the geostationary orbit, which is where you find your GPS satellites. So the first option was the Lagrange orbits, and in fact many space stations that have won the contest before have used Lagrange points, mainly because they're dynamically stable by the means that you can see geometrically, and also because of gravitational forces. But the problem is that you can see the distances from the Earth to the Moon, they're quite far. And of course we want to make it as feasible as possible, and that's a business model that's not very good. So the other option is low Earth orbit, which is where you see the ISS. And of course that's very useful because most of the satellites are located there, it's very easy to accessible and everything. But the problem is that it's not in sync with the rotation of the Earth, so communications are a bit of a problem. And at the same time you have to constantly keep boosting the station, otherwise it might burn back into Earth and might land in Australia or somewhere. So the other option, of course, is geostationary orbit. The geostationary orbit, like I said, where GPS satellites are located, that's a really, really good location because it's always above one spot on the Earth at all times. And another benefit is that it's always within reach of the sunlight. The only difference is at verbal equinoxes, the spring and the fall, when you have the summer and winter equinoxes, then you lose about an hour when you're in the darkness. But the rest of the time, you're always in the light of the sun, which is good for us, for energy purposes. So now in terms of the actual construction process, you could begin, like I said, on the Moon, in lunar orbit with the construction of the central industry hub, or your giant cylinder, or I like to say toilet paper roll. So you start with a toilet paper roll, and then you stick little beads or sequins on them. And these are pretty much that interspatial structure that you saw before, or these elevators. You can just chop them into little bits, and you stick them on the sides, and you sort of strap them on there. Once you complete construction in lunar orbit, you transfer that into geostationary orbit, and you can start construction of your vestibules. Now these vestibules, you have to build them in space, so true launch is sent up from Earth. And then since everything is strapped onto the central energy hub, you simply unstrap them, thread them into one another, or weld them together, and you have the starting to your transport channels. So you can see there. The adjustable gravity labs have not been released yet, but you can see in the next one, they get unfurled as well, attached together, and there you go. So then, after that's done, while all of this is being done on Earth, a manufacturing facility, hopefully in Florida, or California too, they'll be starting construction, mass production of ring segments. So that's jetliner fuselage structure you saw before, as well as those balloons you saw, the Habitat modules. So that mass production begins, and then once that's they're all done construction there, they send them up into space and join them together like blocks of Lego. So after the ring segments are on, you fire up the Habitat modules, screw them into place, and inflate them. And that's the whole station. And then the final step is to add solar panels, just to generate some electricity for the entire station itself. So now it's on to exactly how we're going to build the station in terms of spacecraft. There's a lot of stuff we have right now. NASA's developing the Ares 5. We have the space shuttle that's retiring, a whole bunch of different things. But 50 years in the future, hopefully something is more advanced, because it takes a long time really to construct even small things in space. So we have to also emphasize the fact that you have to use existing technology. So the construction construction vehicle I developed is called a mobile construction vehicle, modular construction vehicle, and this is where the concept of modularity really applies. So this is the base configuration. It's actually based upon the new Ares 5 rocket developed by NASA, which is going to be used to fire a man onto the moon. So you pretty much take the parts where you stick the lunar lander, you replace that with what we have here, which is the command pod and the structural core, etc. And from these you can attach, in Canadian mention, Canadarms. So here's one configuration. And in this configuration, you see there's a whole bunch of Canadarms stuck on the ends, and those are giant, pretty much like hands or whatever. They can do the work for you without having to send people in spacesuits. And then you've got also down there, unless you can see the words, Dexterous Manipulator, or Dexter. And from that Dexter, you can do even more fine work, like removing batteries, screwing in screws, etc. So that's one configuration. The other configuration also uses the Canadarm again, but uses what they use on the ISS, called the Mobile Servicing Station, I believe. So that pretty much means it's a giant, well, not really giant, it's sort of a train, and it latches onto tracks located around the entire space station. So let's say you can simply drop it off like a mothership, drop off the arm, and the arm can travel along the tracks, let's say, to the other side of the station and build something there. So that's construction. Now, transport is another issue. This is what we have here is the moon transport. So let's say you want to get your miners from the moon back to Earth, or you want to get them to the space station, whatever. This is what you would be using. And this, once again, uses existing technology. The central core, the central section there with the engine on it, is also the Ares 5, so that's already been developed, no changes there. And the stuff on the sides is actually another modular component, and that actually uses Ariane 5 rocket boosters. So stuff that the European Space Agency fires into space, they use these rockets. You can use the shells and pretty much produce two different configurations. You can use cargo configuration, you stick like ore on there, you can stick TVs or anything at all, and then you got passenger compartments where you can stick people. So that's from the moon to the station. But from the Earth to the station, also something we can use is space planes, which has been in development with Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, as well as NASA, which is the Venture Star, or the X-33. Unfortunately, it was canceled, but we can revive it, hopefully. And pretty much it's a giant space plane, so it launches into space vertically and glides back down like the space shuttle. So this is another use of existing technology around the station. Now the cost. Space stuff is more notorious than software development for being way too expensive. So, of course, this is a general estimate, but through a bunch of calculations through labor, materials, support facilities, research and development, R&D, I kind of estimated the lowball cost to cost around $563 billion. So roughly, I'm not sure, maybe half of what Obama's offering right now for economic stimulus. Now, so that's what the cost, of course, could be, but barring time delays, research problems, I'm sure you guys have all recognized that, this could easily jump to $2 to $3 trillion. It is a really big project, and I recognize that. So that ends in terms of the whole construction area. Now, how we really support life on the station, because you can really fire a person into space, but if they die from the lack of oxygen or they don't have any food to eat, then that's a bit of a problem. So we want to make sure that they can live up there, they can be born there, they can die, they can live their whole lives there pretty much. So the life support systems is what's there in place in order to make sure that they survive. So the first part I'm going to be covering is the thermal control. Now the problem is in space you don't have an atmosphere. So when you move, let's say, from the darkness of the Earth's far side with the sunlight, it changes, 200 to 300 degrees Celsius, which is a major problem because you don't want people boiling and then freezing and boiling and freezing every single day to be uncomfortable. So we want to make sure that we maintain, proper degree of comfort within the station, and that's accomplished by using actually the infrared energy from the sun. It actually heats an exterior coolant pipe network containing silicone oil, which is a coolant, and that pretty much heats it up, and then that would go into a hot coolant tank, which uses induction heating, which uses magnetic fields to generate heat, and that would keep it warm. And then you can use that to heat the air and heat the water. So it's sort of like what they use now, solar heating, but more, I guess, high tech. And then it can be cooled down with using radiator panels developed by NASA's Glenn Research Center. So that's how we keep ourselves warm and comfy on the station. But now onto gravity.
You can do real cool tricks with that. As you can see, I'm going to take this little platform here and put some water on it and make it go in a circle. Got it on the table here. And now I have to pull it towards the center of the circle, and it will go in a circle. All right, so here we go. 360 degrees, upside down, amazing cup of green water.
So that's pretty much a live demonstration of how gravity is produced on board the station. It uses centripetal force or inertia. The spinning of the station means that all the people on the station are subjected to movement, and because the floor is pretty much moving against them all the time because it's rotating, there's a force they exert downwards into the floor of the station, and that's how you get gravity. So that's pretty much, you saw in the animation at the beginning too, the whole station spinning. That's how we generate gravity. And that's the reason why in the center of the entire space station, there's no gravity whatsoever, because it's like, it's zero gravity pretty much. So now into oxygen production. So how do we recycle the oxygen? You don't want a stuffy office environment. You want to make sure it's like, nice and breathable. You don't want people suffocating or dying. So there's actually a whole system developed around that. And the basis of oxygen recycling is algae tanks, which was developed in Boeing in 1961. So what this pretty much means is you see a green cylinder in the center that contains a whole bunch of algae, and surrounding that is high-intensity discharge lamps. Now these lamps allow the algae to undergo photosynthesis, and algae is extremely efficient at photosynthesis, around 8%, which is on par with sugarcane. But pretty much that would, change the carbon dioxide into oxygen, and then from that point it would go into an air composition monitor, just to make sure you have enough oxygen. If it doesn't have enough, it loops back and goes there again. And once that's done, it goes into a HEPA filter, because you don't want to be breathing in algae. And you also want to make sure that it doesn't smell like wet hay. So once that oxygen's been done, it goes to the Karoo, which is a modular component located at the entrance of any single room on board the station. Well, they stand for air regulating units, central air regulating units. They're pretty much like giant air conditioners or thermostats. They can control the temperature, the humidity, as well as the cleanliness of the air. So let's say you want to set up a microprocessing manufacturing facility next door in the next room. Well, you simply just change the Karoo, swap out some air conditioners, stick in a whole bunch of air filters, and you have a clean room right there. So that's what the Karoo can do. And after the Karoo has adjusted to your own personal liking, it inputs into the room, the laboratory, whatever facility you're into. So once it's done, let's say you're done breathing out, you have carbon dioxide in the room, it's pumped out, it's filtered again because you don't want any dust contaminating the algae, and then it goes in the thermal control system before with the radiator network. So then it's cooled off and then reheated to the proper temperature. And then once again, the whole cycle begins. So water filtration. So that's another problem living in space. Unless you want to constantly fire up snacks like Ruffles chips and chocolate or whatever, you want to make sure that people can grow their own food because it is self-sustainable. In this case, water has to be recycled. It's very expensive to ship things up into space, even 50 years in the future, so you have to recycle what you have. So water filtration begins really from, let's say, your sink or your toilet. From that point, the wastewater is separated into two categories, which is what the industry terms as gray water and black water. So gray water is pretty much what you find from your sinks, your soap, your dirt or whatever, and the black water is what goes on the toilet. So both of this gray water and black water, you can see, goes into ozone treatment, which ozone molecules, which are highly reactive, are bubbled into the solution, and they kill a lot of bacteria and pathogens. From that point, they separate into one point and the other. The gray water goes up to microfiltration and reverse osmosis, which is used by companies like Aquafina and Dasani and whatever. And then you have black water, which goes off to a high-temperature pressure vessel, which is nothing more than a giant cooker. So it cooks the wastewater to kill any more bacteria. So that's the second step of disinfection. And once that's done, the black water then goes into centrifugation, so it spins. And then that separates sort of the waste material into both urine and fecal matter. The urine is then sent off to ultraviolet disinfection, so they pretty much expose it to UV rays to kill any more bacteria. The fecal matter goes out to aerobic respiration, in which you have bacteria eating off any more organic matter. So from these points, essentially, it's another whole cycle, and the end of the cycle shows that you can use the urine as fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer for agriculture, and you can use the human fecal matter, once again, as agriculture fertilizer as well. And the carbon dioxide produced by aerobic respiration of bacteria can also be used for farming. So that's water filtration, and now onto electricity, which is a major problem. Of course, you can't run computers in space with electricity. You can't run anything without electricity on board the station. So the main source of electricity on board this is solar energy. In fact, there's three different technologies that you've been using. You can use multi-junction photovoltaics. You can also use light-guided solar optics, as well as a nano antenna. So those are three different technologies in development. Multi-junction photovoltaic is pretty much using the different spectrums of the sun, specific semiconductors, and from that point you can generate more efficiency in terms of electricity. Light-guided solar optics is a bit of a variation upon that, in which the light is concentrated. Actually, this was developed by a Canadian company called Morgan Solar. So rather than using giant mirrors to do it, it uses a material of acrylic plastic and geometry and shapes of triangles and whatnot to pretty much channel the light onto one multi-junction photovoltaic cell, which is a lot cheaper than trying to put them all around the really expensive solar cells across the entire station. The other option is what they call nano antenna, which is under development in the US, which it uses the infrared electricity to generate a current within antennas, a frequency, AC current. And that, unfortunately, is not feasible right now because the current is much too high. It's around, I think, 60 million hertz, and we only run at 60 hertz, which is a lot larger than that. But that's something under development, and if it gets developed in the future, that can be easily used. So all this electricity, though, it has to be stored somewhere, because you're not always in the sun, or maybe you have peak times when electricity demand is really high or really low. So you want to make sure you have continuous flow of electricity. And so the way to store that is using flywheels. Batteries, unfortunately, are not efficient for long-term storage, and the best option that's most feasible is turning that electrical energy into kinetic energy or rotational energy. So flywheels operate by spinning a giant motor, letting it spin, and then when you want to let it generate electricity, you simply attach a generator to it, and it slows down but converts that energy into electrical energy. And a benefit of this as well is that it counteracts the spinning, the gyroscopic force exerted by the spinning of the station. If you spin these hubs in the opposite direction, then it cancels the force, and therefore it's not that big of a problem. So another thing, though, is that you may not generate enough electricity. Solar cells are known to be incredibly inefficient. So another option is to use what they call mobile energy platforms. This is pretty much giant power satellites that exist right next door to the station, and they beam any sort of electricity they generate onto the station. Or in terms of low demand, they can actually beam it down to Earth, and they can sell the electricity for some money, which could help pay off the cost of construction. So now that's electricity. That's how we get energy on board the station. Now, how do we grow food? The main thing is we can't use soil. Soil is also, there's a lot of problems in terms of the air rot, a lot of problems with water, pathogens, etc. So what's mostly used is hydroponics. And in fact, this here is passive hydroponics, so no active system is really being, pumping nutrient solution into there. This is actually uses sort of a matrix of sponges, pretty much like planting seeds in sponges, and you submerge the sponge into a solution of nutrients, which in this case would be your fecal matter that's been treated in your urine. And that would then soak up the nutrients and would give the seed however much it needs at any time, rather than overfeeding it or underfeeding it. So it's a passive system. You don't have to worry about constantly watering your plants. But with this, agriculture system develops a whole nutrient cycle in which you can take your poo and make it into food, and make your food back into poo again. So it starts off with human consumption on the left, and you can see that the organic waste, your green bins, pretty much, you go into vermicompost. Your wastewater, same thing as well, and pretty much it goes into the end of crops and algae tanks. The algae tanks, it's fed to keep you make oxygen, and the crops, of course, to give you food. Now, any excess algae growth, let's say that grows too much, you have to get rid of it, otherwise it overflows the container. It can be used and stuck into a grinder. Now, this grinder then kind of breaks it down, and this liquid growth medium can then be used to grow meat. Now, this meat growing sounds really sort of disgusting right now, but it actually has been in development so far in the States, which they use a collagen matrix, and they stimulate the growth of muscle cells, and that's how you can get fake meat to grow into the entire station. So you get all your food groups. You get your dairy, well, not dairy, you get your meat and your vegetables all in one, and soft drinks if you want to shoot them up in the earth. But yeah, you get them all on the station. You don't have to worry about shipping costs because they're all grown right in your backyard. So now in terms of safety, space is a dangerous place. I'm sure you all know that. You can't just jump out the window. You will die. So safety is a really important thing. If something happens on the station, you have to leave. There has to be a lot of ways to keep that in place. So the major problem in space is asteroids. Things flying around in space, astronaut gloves, bits of rock, anything, other space stations. They could be flying around, and if they hit your station, you're in big trouble. So the way to prevent that is using something NASA's developed and is using on their spacecraft called multi-shock shields. What this pretty much is a bunch of Nextel fabric layers, and the particle that hits it would kind of shatter into smaller fragments with each successive layer of Nextel, and that would pretty much kind of make it from a giant rifle shot into a shotgun blast. So once the shotgun blast hits the rear wall, it has a lot less energy and therefore has less ability to penetrate. So this applies throughout the entire station, and this is another example of use of existing technology, stuff that's already in use and doesn't require anything fancy at all. No shields, nothing like that. So another problem though in space is radiation. Now, most people on Earth equate radiation protection with lead. That is true, but something that a company has developed in the States called Radiation Shield Technologies is something called Demeron. Demeron is a lightweight fabric that integrates heavy atomic nuclei into a polymer fabric, and what that simulates is it emulates the high electron cloud of heavy atomic metals like lead and other ones like that, uranium, etc. And what that does is it allows you to give you the same benefit of lead, but at a lower weight, a lower cost, and of course a lot more flexible. And that's a benefit for our station because you don't have to worry about weight restrictions anymore because it's a piece of fabric rather than a giant block of lead. So that's for radiation protection. But of course, in case all these systems go wrong, you need to evacuate the station, it's important you have lifeboat systems available. So this is an image of the Habitat modules, or those balloons with the ring segments. And every 7 Habitat modules, you have what they call escape vehicles. And the escape vehicles are pretty much identical, larger versions of what the ISS was in development called the Crew Return Vehicle. Of course, it was scrapped again by NASA, but once again, this is pretty much a miniature space shuttle that could pretty much land on its own. So once again, there's another use of existing technology. Every 7 Habitat modules, you've got one of these. So let's say fire happens on the station, you have to get out, you can simply board the shuttles and fly back to Earth. Another benefit of this with the Habitat modules is that they're detachable. So let's say something catastrophic happens on the Habitat module, you want to isolate it, you want to get rid of it, you can simply eject the module and replace it with another one. So now onto the social structure. So you build a space station for people, you don't build a space station for robots. It's important to have services in place that would keep them comfortable and happy, like your catering, your foosball tables, anything of that sort. You have to keep them comfortable because they are living there for the rest of their lives. So the most important thing is public services. So public services, most people think of that would be government. So the most important thing here with government is there's a whole lot of bureaucracy issues right now with, with the parliament, people bickering back and forth, politics. So it's been simplified down here to a single person, in this case the president, who makes all the decisions, and he's advised by a series of advisors, let's say through public service, international relations, economic development, etc. And he makes a bill, and this bill becomes law. Now, in the case that, let's say, 75% of his advisors say what you're doing is wrong, or let's say half the population on the station says what are you doing, get it fixed, then that law is repealed and undergoes a referendum, and then the people then can decide what the services or the law would be. So another thing is education. So education here, I like the education system in Canada. It's free, which is good for me and good for everyone else. So on board the station, it's also free. But the education system on board this station is really separated into 3 areas of focus: academic development, social development, and linguistic development. So academic development is pretty much like your engineering, your sciences, your maths, etc. Social development is sort of how to be a person, how to be a citizen. Because it's one thing to know skills, technical skills, but it's also important to know how to interact with people. Public speaking skills, leadership skills, how to do your taxes or something like that. That's something that would undergo social development. And the final thing is linguistic development. In fact, on board the station, there will be 3 official languages, and everyone will be required to know all 3. Those languages is English, Mandarin, and Hindi. The reason why I chose those languages, English, first of all, because it is the language of business, and Mandarin and Hindi because China and India have a very large population. They're about to become superpowers soon, and if you want to let your children, if you want to let your children have the most success in the world, then you have to make sure that they understand the best languages or the most well-spoken, and in this case would be Mandarin and Hindi as well. So the schools are found within each vestibule, those giant boxes, but because of this lack of space, they share the recreation facilities with the residences. There's also university on board the campus, university on board each vestibule, and each of this university is actually separated into 5 different campuses. Each campus is located on each of the vestibules. Now these campuses are individually catered to, let's say, specific areas. So one vestibule will say an engineering campus would focus specifically on engineering and have all the facilities necessary, computer labs, machine shops, etc. Another one, let's say, would focus on the arts. They would have a lot of visual arts studios, structural studios, for multimedia, that purposes. So that would be the individual campus itself. Now, based upon the Waterloo system they have here, which I think is really good, the co-op placement program, that's something else that is a stipulation for all leasing companies on the station. They're required to give co-op placements to students such that they don't have to look too far for homegrown talent, and at the same time, it's a benefit for the students as well. So medicine, hospitals is another thing there as well. You don't want to be shipping people back and forth if they get a flu or something. So each vestibule does have a hospital, and you can see here that's pretty much what each hospital contains. It's like a small clinic, pretty much. So taxes. Everyone loves taxes, right? Like they say, there's only 2 things certain in life, death and taxes. And on the station, there's nothing different. So there's 2 taxes on the station. There's corporate tax and individual tax, no sales tax. Too much trouble for me to worry about. So with the income tax is based upon the Canadian system, which is the gear to income ratio. So let's say you make $52,000. Your first $19,000 is taxed at 16%. The $19,000 to $40,000 is taxed at 22%, and from that point on the next 28%, etc. Corporate tax is slightly more than Canada. Canada, I believe, is 19%. On the station, is only 20%. So entertainment and recreation. Everyone loves having fun on the station, right? So we have a whole bunch of facilities located on board. We have a gym. We have a pool. We have an exercise room. We have foosball tables, pool tables, arcade games, air hockey, a little bit more than what you have here. And we have locker rooms. So that gives you a full assortment. Let's say you want to go for a run, you just run around the track, want to take a dip, there's a pool available for you, want to have some fun with your friends, there's a game room available, want to lift out, work out, they're all available for you as well. And at the same time, we also have a theater, multi-purpose theater. You want to run, let's say, a little school show. Let's say they want to put on like Macbeth or some Shakespearean play, or let's say you want to show off your breakdancing or DDR skills. You can show them off here. You've also got a park, which is actually necessary, because you can live in an office building all your life, but you probably go insane. So for psychological benefit reasons, you want to have an open space. Of course, you can't have the entire thing open space, otherwise it's unfeasible. So you have a small-ish sort of park, like a parquet. And this park, of course, has all your amenities. It's got tree-lined pathways. It's got a pond. So it's quite small. It's comfortable, and each of these are found within each vestibule. So let's say you go to one park and you say, "Oh, there's too many people here." Well, that's okay. I'll just walk to the next one. So now the economy. So you can build a space station in space, get it all built. Let's say everything happens, but you want to make sure that it stays there, for a long time. So you want to make sure it has an economy, a business. So of course, the economy on the station can be organized into 4 different sectors: primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. So what the primary sector is natural resources. So the requirement of natural resources, the processing of them to be used in development and manufacturing. So in our case, there's no resources in space aside from the moon, so that would be our main source of income for that one. The secondary is all the manufacturing that can take place. And there's a whole bunch. But the most important one is the spacecraft construction, which I showed you before with the satellite manufacturing facility. Now, you can see the estimated percentage of the manufacturing GDP is 80%. So what the benefit of spacecraft construction is that since it's zero gravity and it's in space, you can build larger, you can build cheaper, and you can build heavier as well. You don't have to worry about any size restrictions or problems with launch or failures of that sort. You also see crystal growing, homogeneous mixes, perfect spheres, and luxury products. Who doesn't want to buy a pen made in space, right? Tertiary, tourism and banking. So tourism. I know Virgin Galactic is offering, for a few $1 million. You can go into space for about 5 minutes. But the same thing can be offered on board the station as well, and can provide some income to help support and pay off the construction fees and provide a real economy. Banking is an interesting one. Switzerland is known as the banking capital country of the world because it's neutral, it's safe, and etc. But what beats a country on Earth? A country in space. Unless you fire a nuclear missile at it, you can't destroy it. So you can pretty much set up a bank there, and let's say you can hold mutual funds there, you can store gold there, you can store money there, and it's pretty much immune from any sort of physical threat because it's in space. Quaternary is the terms of research. So research and development, something that Google I know actively involves in. So there's a whole bunch of areas you can get involved in. You get biomedical research, fundamental biology, fluid physics, material behavior, combustion behavior, and all of this stuff would help benefit towards both a researching economy and innovation economy, as well as for manufacturing in the future as well. So now onto the immigration process. So how the heck do you even get on the station in the first place? You don't have to do a whole bunch of tricks at all. In fact, the majority of inhabitants are sponsored by the companies. Because the fact is, it's a space station, it is not another planet. You can't simply choose people off the street and say, you will go, and you won't go. In order to make the most use of the facilities on board the station and to produce the most amount of productivity and money, it's best that we have inhabitants sponsored by the companies so you don't have to worry about retraining or anything of that sort. But for those who don't, are not sponsored, are using a point system similar to Canada's own immigration point system. So you get points, let's say, for language, for education, for racial status, etc. So that's how you get on board. But on top of that point system where you're sponsoring, all candidates must also undergo an additional medical examination. No one with tuberculosis no one with TB is allowed on the station for obvious reasons. No one with spreadable diseases like SARS or H1N1. Background criminal examination checkers as well. We don't want criminals on the station. We want to make the most use of our time. Adaptation test. We're pretty much going to stick you in a giant tube and see how well you live for 3 weeks. And if you survive, you pass. And then you've got the interview, which is pretty much be sitting aside from you, ask you a bunch of questions about your family to make sure that you're not psychotic. So that pretty much ends off my whole station presentation. And now I guess it goes on to people I have to thank, really. So the people I have to thank, the companies, first of all, would be NextEra Energy Resources. They're a renewable energy company. They helped me with the poster printing. Then you got Daily Planet. I think you might have seen on Discovery Channel. They helped print off my project on a big 11 by 17 sheet. The Toronto District School Board and my school, Northern Secondary School, for funding my trip to Orlando, Florida, where I'll be speaking the same presentation to a bunch of people. NASA and the National Space Society for giving me the opportunity to do this project. Google itself for inviting me here, as well as for giving me the opportunity to make those wonderful pictures you saw. They're all actually free from Google SketchUp program. Finally, my staff advisors, Mr. Wells, Ms. Evans. Mr. Wells really inspired me to do the project. Ms. Evans has really helped me out in terms of technical aspects and any sort of grammatical errors. And of course, the most important thing is my family. My mom and my dad who's sitting here in the room with you. So that pretty much is it, but I guess the most important thing you should really get out of this is I really have to recognize that this design is nothing more than a fantasy. I come here talking to you today. I don't expect you to give me money to help pay for it. I know it's not going to be built. It costs a lot of money. There's inherent flaws within the design, you know. It may not be technologically feasible. It sure as heck is not financially feasible, and may not be socially feasible at this time. But there are ideas of sustainability that you can really take away from this. The whole idea of, you know, making sure that your environment, you recycle, renewable energy, you know, the isolation, you know, self-sustainability, that really applies both on the station and here in modern life. And that's something I think that we should be focusing on with our new economy. But above all, it really shows my own personal hope and dream that space will one day be colonized. And I hope that you all also share in my dream and believe in this dream, because really, when everyone believes, dreams become reality. Thank you.
Eric? Oh, thanks, Eric.
No problem.
Any questions from the audience?
Hi, so I'm sure you've been asked this many times, but where did you get the name Aston from?
Oh, Aston. It actually came from an Egyptian god named Thoth, T-H-O-T-H. I didn't really like that name. It doesn't sound right for a station, so I looked for one of the alternate names. But pretty much Thoth is responsible for he's the god of divine balance between good and evil. And he's also credited by the ancient Egyptians as the creator of all things magic, philosophical, and science. And of course, there's a lot of science in here, maybe some philosophical, and who knows, maybe even some magic as well.
Alex?
Hi, so how long did it take you to think about the design of this station and do all the drawings, graphs, think about different aspects and everything, like the whole design? Like a month process, 3 years, 1 year, 5 years?
Well, I actually started, this was the third year that I participated in the competition, but the specific design took me 9 months, along with juggling some schoolwork and other extracurricular activities, but yeah. No, another question.
So was the design perfected, like built on top of the previous years, or you simply decided that the old one was not good and you had to change it radically?
The first year was actually a giant donut, like you get from Tim Hortons. Same thing, just a giant donut, 8 kilometers in diameter. It was a 15-page report. It was relatively rudimentary. I was grade 9, so I didn't know too much then. But as each year progressed, I realized that, you know, the ring module is not that feasible anymore, and you have to start looking into stuff that we have here on Earth, how to use existing technology and fire it into space and make sure that it works. And that one, of course, that's when I arrived at the final one. The second year I did the same thing, a donut. And then this year I decided, well, I think that's enough. I'm not getting anywhere with this one in terms of the contest. And at the same time, it doesn't look really feasible at all. So what else can I look at? And that's when I came up with the whole pod system.
So along that line, are you going to stop here, or are you going to continue to iterate on the design, and we might see something
I don't know. You know, it'd be nice to continue on the design, but I have to realize that there's a future ahead of me. I got education, things are over. I got exams. I have to find a girlfriend, as a global male would say. So it is a good project. It is a good thought experiment, but there's a lot more places where I could use my skills. It was a nice thing to do, to combine all my ideas of engineering, technology, sociology, and biology into one project, but I think it's time for me to go on to something else. But I'd be willing to go back and do it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.